Hi, and welcome to Spaminar, the Society of Props Managers webinar series for live theater prop professionals. I'm Mia Jumbo, Spam member, and the props area mentor for Ithaca College. I'm also the production manager as well, so I hold a couple of different hats, but it's really fun to be here today. All right, SPM, also known as SPAM, short for the Society of Props Managers, got its start back in 1994 when a small but mighty group of props folks in the Midwest came together to tackle challenges and make sure props had a seat at the table alongside other production departments. Fast forward to today, and we are a thriving group of over 150 professional prop managers and educators from theaters, opera companies, and schools, all connected through an international network. We share resources, swap tips, troubleshoot problems, and support each other with everything from safety info to continuing education. Like our past seminars, tonight's session is pay what you can. Any donations go directly to supporting these programs and our annual grants for early career prop professionals. If you are able to chip in, we will drop the link in the chat. I'll wait a couple seconds for that. Every bit helps, and we're super grateful for your support. Also, just a heads up, live transcription is on for today's webinar, so you can follow along in real time. And don't worry if you miss anything. We're recording the session and we'll share it later on our YouTube channel. All right. Well, with further ado, I'm going to introduce our instructors for tonight. I'm joined tonight by Ben Hohman and Rachael Erichsen for the behind-the-scenes look into the wild world of creating fake animals for the stage. Rachael is the properties director at Baltimore Center Stage and has been happily propping shows around Maryland since 2012. She is also a freelance fabricator and teaching artist, always spreading the props love. And then there's Ben. Ben is the props director at Utah Shakespeare Festival, where he's been for 32 years and literally wrote the book on prop making. 101 plus tips and tricks every prop maker should know. He is also very active with USITT, where he teaches workshops and runs labs. All right, and during our session today, before they get started, I just wanted to mention that you can drop any questions in the chat, and at the very end, we'll be able to go through them and have Rachael and Ben answer any questions that come up. All right, without even more further ado, over to Rachael and Ben.
Awesome. Good evening. Rachel, do you want to say anything else about your job or anything before we jump into the PowerPoint?
No, just that I'm glad to be here. I'm excited for you to kick this off.
Awesome. Let me see if I can get my screen to share. Three things while this was loading up that when Rachel and I met to sort of plan all this out and talk about it, that we sort of realized sort of is a through line through all of these projects is whenever we have an animal on stage and we start talking about it with directors and designers, some of the questions we ask is, how was it used? How was it handled? Rachel has an example much later on in the presentation where a snake gets mightily abused, and that goes into sort of construction method and things like that. Second is longevity, reusability, and is it something for stock? A lot of these shows have a one-off animal that you're probably never going to use again. So how much resources do you want to put toward that? So think about that in this process. And the third is sort of using those two pieces of information, how much structure does this animal need? Does it need a skeleton inside of it for movement and structure, or can it really be a sort of a self-sculpture type of animal? So as we go through these projects, we'll talk about those things as we go. I believe the first one is me. Yeah. So we did a production of Big River, and there is a hog, a wild hog that is hanging in the cabin. And Tom actually cuts its head off and sprinkles blood around the cabin to make it look like he's been murdered. So when we started this process, our biggest concern was making sure that the scale of the pig body was correct. So one thing we've sort of figured out over the last couple of years is there's a lot of really great stuffed animals out there now that are really good proportion wise. So we actually bought this little pig, and we tore him apart. We found all the seams and cut him apart. We then traced each of the pieces of the fabric onto a piece of paper. We scanned them in and then enlarged them in Photoshop and printed them out on our large scale printer. But you could also grid your sketch of the fabric and lay it out by hand or whatever. But basically, we knew that this pig was about a foot long. We wanted our pig to be 5 feet long, and so we enlarged it by 500%. And all of a sudden, we had patterns that we could just cut out of fabric and sew together and know that our pig was going to be the right shape instead of having to try to sort of like figure it out as we went. Um, all the joints and all that kind of stuff. It gave us really good structure to start with. So that is kind of how we approach most animals at the festival now is we just buy one that we like and cut it up and basically use the pieces to make patterns. Um, oh no, it will not forward. Okay. There we go. Okay. Then for this particular project, we bought a taxidermy head. We used a couple of different companies. The one we used the most is Van Dyke's Taxidermy out of South Dakota. And so we bought this as a base to use, and then using our um, fabric pieces, started putting it all together. You'll notice that in this picture, the head's actually cut off. We actually chopped off the head with a Sawzall and installed magnets and washers so that when it came time, he could literally take the axe and sort of look like he was attacking the pig, but it just popped off in his hands. Like he controlled how he got it off. And then really close in the bottom of the picture is actually an animal glove. We actually went on Amazon and just typed in pig gloves, and you could type in bear gloves and all kinds. And they make like, I guess for Halloween, I'm not really sure, but we bought 2 pairs of pig gloves, um, and attached them to our fabric body, sewed them on. For the fabric for this, we're using pink terry cloth, so like literally towel material, because we've found over the years a lot of our animals, it's a really great texture if you add paint, like dry brush paint onto the terry cloth. Sort of that skin tone, the pink underneath sort of shows through, but the paint actually makes all of the terry cloth fiber sort of stand up and get stiff and feel very much like fur if you end up touching it. So we dry brush the whole thing with a sort of dark brown slash black paint. Um, and here he is hanging in our warehouse to this day. We don't know if we'll ever use him again, but we still have him hanging around. Um, uh, so yeah, that's our pig. So the biggest thing here is, finding something to use as a pattern. This has almost no internal structure because he really only ever touched the head. So it's literally just stuffed with batting to keep weight down because it hung on a wall. And then the gloves for the hands. So that's our pig.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. I had never seen those pig gloves before, and now I'm going to Google all sorts of gloves after this. Looking forward to it. This is our friend, the Gerfalcon. He was made for a production of Neville's Island, which is this play that's not produced very often for reasons of special effects, I think, in my heart. But it is about 4 men who are on a business trip and get marooned on a scrap of an island and they lose their minds. So there is a scripted portion of this where someone has to walk in with this dead Gerfalcon on their back, and then it becomes clear that it is has been gutted. We can go on to the next slide. So it needed to have like a climbing cord noose on it, like you would use for rappelling or something like that, and to have its innards removed and blood coming down of it. It was also important that the wings stay out stiff to the sides and have some bounce to them. So thinking about what the armature was going to be, and also the cost of this, because it was done on a pretty small budget, I ended up just using chicken wire as the entire interior structure, because that was going to, by like folding and crimping it, I was able to get a little more structure along the top of the wings where I wanted them, and then a little bounce to it as it was carried, because it was important that it looked fairly freshly killed, like it hadn't gotten rigid yet. There were a lot of specifications in the script about it, which is actually my favorite. I really love having a challenge to come up to. On to the next slide. So the gut texture needed to appear wet, but not actually get on the actor's clothing, obviously, because that kind of laundry is no fun for anybody. So what we ended up doing is once we had the wire mesh armature, I lined the entire interior of it with upholstery foam, which is one of my favorite materials. And then we sponged latex paint into the upholstery foam and then mixed paint with a high gloss medium, kind of like a sealer like you'd put on a floor or a piece of furniture, and just really gooped that over everything to give it that kind of wet look. That's a technique that we'll probably talk about in the gore spam Minar at some point, but it gives you a nice set finish that looks wet and glistening and fresh, super visceral, without actually dripping on anything. We also needed to have pieces of it that removed, so we also took chunks of upholstery foam and gave them that whole treatment so that pieces could be picked out and removed with fingers. Next slide. Going to the next one, yeah. And because this needed to be larger than life, there we go, thank you. It was supposed to be carried on by an actor and for him to look in silhouette like he was entering as an angel, because they're all supposed to have lost their minds and think he's dead. So I actually had to build the wingspan way larger than it would be for that species of European gerfalcon, and also larger than would work for the body of that bird. Hopefully no scientists were in the room, but we have the wings there having the rigidity as he's walking. Next slide. Because it was larger than life, we were able to use turkey feathers, which was super cheap. Otherwise, as you know, it's illegal to trade or buy predatory bird species feathers, so you cannot actually buy gerfalcon feathers online. I did paint stippling and treatment to treat them. We did air dry clay, like lightweight air dry clay for the beak, and then because it was free, I took some pebbles out of a nice little flower vase that was laying around and stuck them in for the eyes, and then worked the feathers around that. What was nice about using the completely unfilled armature is that I was able to, once I had the feathers on it, additionally sculpt detail into it as made sense. The feathers were all just applied with hot glue, which was fun for my fingers later. And then next slide. And you can see the back, and then like the light gray and black paint stippling we did to get that European falcon look. And then as it progressed through tech, we added blood where they wanted it from stage. And I think, what else? Oh, the little feet were taxidermy stuff. So, because I'm also a fan of Van Dyke's taxidermy. And
Right.
on
Yeah,
to you, Ben.
they have
Thanks.
some awesome stuff.
Yep.
Cool. So last year we did The Winter's Tale, one of the most famous stage directions in theater, Exit Pursued by Bear. And our director wanted two bears in the show. They wanted a bear rug in the court. And then for the actual bear, they wanted a large, very large, oversized sort of puppet bear. Um, Again, trying to figure out a way to do the head. We found, and they're really popular recently, these sort of cardboard taxidermy heads. So we were able to purchase this pattern for I think $5 off Etsy. And it comes with like literally all the pieces. And I think this was scaled to be about a foot tall. We wanted our head to be just over 2 feet, so we basically doubled this in size. Um, and first we cut it out of cardboard. We did the normal size first, which is the picture on the bottom left. Then we enlarged it to the 2 feet, which is the middle picture. And then we actually shot some videos of this in January to show to the director and the designer. And they said, looks great, let's move forward. So then we actually took the patterns, put them back in the computer, turned them into CNC files, and cut them all out of 2-inch thick foam. which is the picture all the way to the right. We actually removed, I think, 4 layers. Once we got them all cut out, we realized it was, which should have been like 1.5 inch foam, but we couldn't find 1.5 inch foam locally. So we removed 4 layers of the foam, glued them all together, and then basically shaped them, rounded them out because we didn't need the pattern came with like jaggedy fur edges, which we didn't need if we were going to apply fur to it. So we just kind of rounded everything out. Um, I don't even remember what, I think we just used like 2.5 inch styrofoam balls for the eyes. This is early on in the eye process. They get much more realistic as we go. And they also wanted, for the puppet, they wanted the mouth to move, and for the rug, they wanted it open to see all of its fangs. So we actually cut the foam and allowed the mouth to open up. For the puppet, we actually added elastic to both sides so that when the head moved around, the jaw just kind of bounced. It wasn't manipulated by the puppeteer. It just moved kind of on its own. Um, so here is the mouth. All the teeth are made of like friendly plastic or dental plastic. The tongue is a piece of EVA foam. Um, and then for the fur, um, we don't have any good fabric stores locally. And the size of the puppet bear was really massive. So Marielle, my assistant, did a bunch of research and actually found fur comforters from this place called Coma Inducer. And they have one in toasted coconut, which is the color we bought. And we actually bought 3 queen size comforters. It was about $50 per comforter. And it was like literally a comforter size piece of fur, which was awesome because we had to like sew it together because sewing fur can be a pain in the butt. We did do a little bit of sewing, but they were really large pieces to start with, which was great. Um, so here's the rug, and the fur on the head itself was hard to see the eyes and the teeth and stuff. So we gave it a little bit of a haircut, so we could see its features a little bit better. Um, and here's the finished rug. We made the toenails out of friendly plastic as well. His snout is another piece of just EVA foam, which we didn't even paint. And his nostrils are just 2 screws that we jammed into the foam with some glue. Um, and then we lined the whole thing underneath with green felt, like a traditional animal rug would be lined with. The one issue we ran into with the rug was all of the women had these really long trains on their dresses, and the queen's train was beaded and really heavy, and it kept flipping the bear paws over as she walked over the rug. So we ended up putting large neodymium magnets into the paws of the bear and screwed washers into the deck of the stage, so that the paws would stick down with the magnets, so it wouldn't move when they walked over it. Um, for the puppet, this is the sketch from the designer. Um, uh, that the director was like, "This is great. This is awesome. I love it. Let's build this." And I'm like, "Can I get more information than this sketch?" And the designer was like, "Well, it should be like 9 feet tall." And that was all we got. So we just kind of jumped in, head exactly the same. We knew that they wanted the puppet to be really um, move a lot and have a lot of activity on stage. So we started with a mock-up. We basically made the head in the exact same way we did for the rug. We initially made these claws. They're welded aluminum. Um, and then we just took a giant piece of muslin to make sort of the back piece of fabric and the arms as a starting point. And then literally the second day of rehearsal, we had our first bear fitting with the actors. Got all 3 actors out there. What you can't see behind that sort of sheer beige fabric in the front, which was going to hide the center puppeteer, and after the first fitting, it actually got cut, is a full outdoor backpack frame, which is the structure that we use to support the head. And the center puppeteer actually wore the backpack frame because the bear was about 9.5 feet tall when the actor stood completely up. Um, so we had a fitting, did some tests. They gave us a ton of notes. And so we went back and literally every week we had at least a 2 hour bear rehearsal with the puppeteers, stage management, director, choreographer. And then we added the other actors in the scene slowly throughout the process. And we just kept kind of adding to it it was fun to transport it back and forth. We didn't want it out in the open, so more than once I drove through town with a bear in the passenger seat of the truck. Um, um, Again, slowly adding pieces. Once we got the shape and the lengths of everything correct, we then added the fur body because it added about 25 pounds of weight to the whole thing. And so we're like, okay, how does this feel? And they were really great to like offer suggestions and give us comments and like this is working really great. This is a little more awkward. The claws actually, the fingers got longer, the handles got shorter. So they had more control. Originally, they wanted the claws to actually hinge, and have the puppeteers have a string so they could actually like close around a person. And the performers really early on were like, I can't hold the claw up and make it hinge, but I can just pivot it at its wrist and create that same movement without the hinge, which actually reduced the weight of the claws considerably and made their jobs a little bit easier. Um, Here it is backstage. We actually built a structure to hold it backstage so it wasn't sitting on the ground or on the backpack itself. So it's kind of hanging in storage. And you can see the bear rug kind of there on the left. Um, and then uh, here it is in tech rehearsal. So the actors aren't yet in costume. The first time we kind of see it under light. Um, and then here it is in performance mode. It was really dynamic. It was a really cool project to work on. Mostly, and I think this is true of any animal on stage or any puppet on stage, the collaboration and the amount of time that you work through the process and make sure that as you're working through it with the performers, with the director, with everybody, that you're hitting all of the moments that they need, that it does the things it needs to do. That if you have to gut the animal on stage, that you can do that. Like Rachel was talking about with her Falcon, you need to make sure that the actors can do everything, that it has the right visual look on stage, and the more you can collaborate with people who are using it and handling it, and make sure that it does what they need it to do, the more successful you're going to be. This probably in my 32 years here, one of my most favorite projects because first dress rehearsal, the director came up to me with tears in her eyes and she's like, I've been dreading this bear for 6 months and it is awesome. And the designer was excited about it. And the performers loved doing it. They figured out a way to make it breathe. Because when it first came out on stage, it was on our slip stage, it like slid out and it sat there without moving for a good 30 seconds. But the performer in the middle figured out that if he just flexed his shoulders, the whole back of the bear would kind of expand a little bit as if it was breathing. And so he'd make it breathe like 4 times before it ever started to move. And that collaboration of everybody was what made this successful. It was cool.
Thank you, Ben. I will second that if you can get the performers excited about the animal they'll be working with, they will give it a life beyond anything you ever could. And it is a beautiful thing. Much like this poor turtle who was, in fact, met his death every day on stage. Um, I believe every animal I've built has died on stage. And this, which is not a record I'm proud of, this turtle was scripted to get hit by a truck on stage, off stage, and to get flung on while spinning so that he would land right in the middle of the stage and spin for a solid 20 seconds in front of the audience. Which is an ask that could have been very high tech. And we, because we were also putting a truck on stage, etc., we're trying for a low tech thing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to build a top. Thank you. Perfect. Oh, take it back one. I'm going to build a top basically. So carved out of foam, a shape that would spin perfectly on its axis when hit by somebody or thrown by somebody. Because it needed to get slid across a hard stage every night after we carved it out of foam, I basically aqua resined the whole thing. Aqua resin is a water-based fiberglassing system. I use it a lot. It is great because once it has set, you can carve it and sand it and all those kind of things. And it also holds its shape really well and is super lightweight. What I enjoyed about this is because the actors interacted with it after they realized, oh my God, I hit a turtle. I'm going to go see if it's alive. They shook its paw and picked it up and its little head had to move. So we I sculpted and sewed all of those pieces out of really thin black vinyl, basically, and then went back through and mushed them and stuffed them to the right amount. I used to have pet turtles, so I knew what it needed to feel like, which was also a little sad for me. But we got it going, applied all the paint treatments, go on to the next slide. The fun thing for me, I love dramaturgy, and I was like, well, actually, this turtle wouldn't, like this species of turtle would not exist out in where they're going, like Arizona. It's a red-eared slider. It wants water. They were like, we don't care. We love the color. It needs to show up on our weird purple deck. And I said, again, yes, collaboration. Here we are. So we put all the like bright lines on it, the high visible red little tummy, so that when it's spinning around, it's just a beacon of sadness on stage. Gave it its little eyes so you could feel sorry for it. We'll go on to the next slide. Yeah, its little side eye, and then made sure to get the indentations in there because the actors did need to stick their fingers, like prod into it next to its arm to make sure it wasn't going to tuck back in and run away. On the next slide, we also made a rock out of aqua resin that an actor had to throw. So this is the turtle hanging out with its brother, basically. And we'll go to the next thing. We have another animal that met its death on stage. This was our rattlesnake for Men on Boats. There's a moment where the snake is discovered. It was discovered in our show inside this rock, actually. So there was a cavity made inside of it that the snake would coil into. So it had to be extremely flexible, but also rigid, so that when it was pulled out of the rock for its moment of reveal, that it would just like spring out into this whole shape. So what I decided to do was use headliner foam, like in a car, and make a tube out of that because that's pretty resilient. And we looked at a whole bunch of different fabrics online. I wanted something with some stretch and resilience and something that wasn't going to snag and rip because I knew this thing was going to get killed on stage. And I was like, what is built not to snag and rip? Women's tights. So I went and found some high quality snakeskin leggings and bought a few pairs. We really liked the pattern on this one. So I flatlined it onto the headliner foam, made the whole long tube. It was really fun to turn it right side out, as anyone who sewed knows. Stuffed it with just the right amount of polyfill to let it still have some give. And ideally what we wanted, as was described to us, is that when someone flung it around, it would look like it had a spine, but it would still bend in any direction. So it was me in the hallway sitting here making sine waves with this until it moved in the right undulation, I suppose. Added a few details. We couldn't put anything hard on it because we knew it was going to get whipped around, basically used as a whip on stage by an actor. So no hard eyes, no hard rattle. Everything had to be soft-bodied and done with texturizing and shaping through sewing. And then on next slide, here is our poor friend just getting whacked around. Got grabbed by the middle and flung around like a bolus, and then by the tail and hit against the ground multiple times. And final slide, he has made it through to this day with only a little bit of damage. He still kind of looks like a snake, so I call that a win. And then next, last and final, so there is an animal in this photo, believe it or not. It is a squirrel, and it resides on our actor's right shoulder. It is getting anointed with honey in this picture. So the honey was actually like a sodium alginate water solution that was colored super goopy. It's the stuff you grow bacteria in if you're trying to make a petri dish. So these squirrels needed to be washable. I say squirrels because they also had to drip dry. There were 2 show days, 3 show weekends, and so we made a rotating cast of 3 squirrels. Next slide. You might be able to see the squirrel tail hanging down on the right shoulder there. It's now getting baptized in wine, which was the next step of its journey. So this was for Bacchae, by the way, a staging of the Bacchae. Very strange staging. Is there a normal staging of the Bacchae? Let's be real. So our squirrel got just killed every night. And then once he sat down on the wine bath with our lovely actor in the middle, he got held up prominently in front of the audience and kissed on the nose like a little nose boop. So there was no hiding this guy. Next slide. He needed to look drowned. So at first we started out with just a polyfill squirrel. I went and I do a lot of freehand animal patterning, so I just like made some squirrels. I liked how they looked, but when they used them on stage, they were too stiff once they were in the water. So I ripped all the guts out and filled them with Beanie Baby filling, like little poly beads. And we got them to the right amount that they felt actually pretty limp and drowned looking on stage. The fur is 2 different kinds of fur that we, once I put them on, I gave them little haircuts to make their little feet show through and shape their heads and make them their little adorable ears. And next slide. And then you can see, oh, there's one. They live in my office now. So they live in my office trees. They just they're enjoying their retirement, I can tell you. And then the next one is you can see the belly and the back. Ended up using, I wanted 2 different tones for it just because the fur worked differently. And I think stuffed animals are great. So we used the longer tail fur on the back, and then a different one that we cut a little shorter for its little belly. And that is our squirrel friends. And I think we're on to Ben after this.
Yes. So we did a Western version of Comedy of Errors. And there's a bar that they go to called the Porpentine. And our director was like, well, let's like use a porcupine. Like that'll be our Western version of that. So they wanted a porcupine, a stuffed taxidermy porcupine on the top of the sign. And during the gunfight in the show, they wanted it to spin around. So it had to be fairly lightweight and have some structure to it. So we decided to just buy a taxidermy porcupine body, and then add fur. The rods that we basically epoxied rods in all 4 legs that came down to a 1/2 inch plywood base. And that whole thing was then put on the motor to spin. So the legs weren't receiving a lot of the stress the plywood was, because it was bolted on all 4 sides. This is the artisan trying to get the fur onto the body. Like Rachel, we did a couple different furs. We did a low nap dark fur for the head and for the belly. And then we found this really long fur. I think this was at Joann's when Joann still existed. To use for the upper body. And then we watered down white glue to about 50%, and ran it through the fur to make it really sort of stick up and be rough and scraggly versus a nice smooth fur. And then for the quills, the crew had to handle this every single day, and we didn't want anything extra sharp. So these are actually cardboard lollipop sticks that we just bent slightly and then poked holes through the fur into the foam, and used a little bit of hot glue on the tips to actually stick into the foam body of the taxidermy. And we still have this in the warehouse. It's been, I don't know, 10 years since that production, and almost all the quills are still in really good shape. There is all fitted. Oh, we actually used a metal plate. I lied. It's a metal plate for the bottom, not a plywood plate. But there he is. I think we did add eyes after this. Yeah, that's our porcupine. So fairly simple. Oh, there's his face. Yeah, there's his eyes. But you can see how the fur's kind of like sticked up and matty, which if you've ever seen an actual porcupine, they are not clean or smooth or pretty animals generally, unless they're in a zoo. So the glue really makes that fur have a great texture to it.
Yeah.
And there he is on his sign. Very cute.
I love that. And I love thinking about like cheap and easily accessible solutions of things that you maybe like use every day, like a lollipop stick, and using it as something totally different, which is something that I did on this, which will become an ostrich. So in moments where you do not have the budget to buy $300 worth of ostrich feathers, and your designer insists that hay fever will not be hay fever without a taxidermy ostrich on stage. What is one to do? Personally, what I did is went rummaging in Scenic's scrap-doof and started to rip it into strips. Because I grew up in the Southwest where there's ostrich farms everywhere, and I always thought they just looked like raggedy bits of fabric. So I said, I will make this. So I made lots and lots of that, and shout out to my latch hook childhood. I tied all of them onto this armature. And next slide, which saved me enough money to be able to buy a taxidermy form. Shout out to Van Dyke's again. We love them. So we got the taxidermy ostrich neck form, which I attached onto that armature. And was also able to then spend a little money on actual ostrich feathers for the little drapey ends. Obviously, I don't think we've mentioned, but research images are really key to our workflows. It's really crucial not to just build something out of your head, because it just will not look right, right? So pulled a lot of research images for this, and taxidermy ostrich is not what I thought it would look like. But built it to those specs. Next slide. I went ahead and then all the little shreddy bits that came off the nice white feathers, and then also shreddy bits of white fabric that I had, I flocked the ostrich's neck, which that just means I sprayed it with spray glue and just sat there and literally blew little shreds onto it until they stuck, so it would have a little furry neck. Once I had the wingspan I wanted, I knew that when I mounted it, we were going to mount it to look like it was in fight mode. So we got it up there with a genie lift, and then basically bent the armature into that like backwards elbow shape that they have, those scary dinosaurs that they are. Did also spring for taxidermy eyes, because those eyes are terrifying. We love it. And Distance honestly sold the rags as feathers. You really can't tell. We blended them in with a few like black ostrich feathers, but we were able to make this for very little money and have a happy designer in the end. And then the final slide is just in context of the whole set. Would you have noticed there wasn't an ostrich there? The jury is out, but we made it happen, and we're still proud of it to this day. I think Ben has a surprise after this.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to real quick on my
Ooh.
sheet. Joseph, by the way, the duvetine feathers and latch hooking into like brilliant. Like, you can't afford the real thing. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Think about, I always tell people that to tours of my shop and things like that, it's like use what you have, make the best thing you can. Like, it's not always going to be exactly what it's supposed to be, but if you can fool the audience and make the designer and director happy, like, then do it. Joseph, there's the sheep, and I've done Joseph a couple times. This time they wanted a whole like little train of sheep. So basically plywood cutout, piece of half-inch upholstery foam, some fun little slightly flocked fabric from Joann's, and then their little heads are just styrofoam with some white and black paint. And then we just lined them all together, and like they literally pulled the rope across the stage, and the rope got almost all the way across. Then you saw the first sheep, and then like I don't know, probably for like a minute and a half, they just kept pulling the rope, and the sheep just kept coming. There was like I think 12 or 14 of them, and they were all just connected together to create the whole flock of sheep. So okay, now I'm going to stop screen sharing. And Sarah, can you pin me so I'm big? I brought something. Ooh, that sun's going to help too. So this is, there we go. Oh, my phone is ringing. Michael Barr. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. There's a show called Foxfire, which is set in Appalachia, and it's an older couple live on this farm, and the old woman decides they've killed a pig to butcher it, and she wants to basically boil the head to make souse meat. So again, we started with a taxidermy form. We used the terry cloth and the brown paint to create the skin, but she basically is supposed to be peeling the skin off of this thing, and the actress, lovely actress, but was really terrified of like. She's like, I don't want a sharp knife. I don't want a sharp knife. I'm like, okay, we'll figure this out. So we basically created patches that have little Velcro dots on them. And then we painted underneath them to look like, the muscle and stuff. And we used like sort of clear Velcro, so that all the patches could peel off as she went. Um, and there's like four more, but I won't do all of them. And then the other thing that happens is while she's doing this, a salesman comes up in a white shirt, button-up white shirt, and wants to buy the property. And she's kind of talking to him and kind of ignoring that he wants to buy the property. And she's struggling to get the eye out. She wants to pop the eyes out, and she asks him to help. Um, so he reaches in with a knife and he grabs the eye and he pops the eye out. The eyes are rubber grapes that we added a little bit of string to the back to create sort of the blood vessels. And we painted them. The reason with these instead of marbles or a glass eye is these, when they hit the ground, they didn't roll and they didn't really bounce, which worked really, really well. And then as he did that, the sort of surprise is that in the ear, we actually hid, it's actually on this side, we actually hid a food coloring tube. And before we covered the skin, we actually ran a tube from that food coloring bottle to the eye socket. And I don't know if you can see it in Zoom, but right here on the edge is the end of the tube. And we filled that bottle with disappearing ink. And so each night, as he popped the eye out, he would just squeeze that and it would shoot disappearing ink all over his white shirt and make a big dark spot. And if you know disappearing ink works, if it heats up, it disappears. So he was on stage for like another 2 minutes with this big black stain. And by the time he got off stage and down to his dressing room, his shirt was white again. So we didn't have to deal with like goop or nastiness for the costume department to clean up. But super fun. Again, the most expensive thing was the taxidermy form. Thank you, Van Dykes. But the terry cloth and glue and paint makes a really realistic looking skin. And again, just working with the actors to make sure that they're comfortable with the action, what they have to do, all that. This is Wilbur. He just hangs out on one of our 3 animal shelves in our warehouse. And I think that is our presentation. So now we have time for questions.
All right. So one question from one of our viewers today is Isabel. They want to know, can you let us know the budget or approximate cost per animal? What animal? Wow. Okay. Animal, to give us an idea of like what you're spending. Also the timeline that you had to make it.
Sure, I'll go first. For the full body pig, we spent, I think, about $300, and most of that was the taxidermy form. Honestly, it's about $300. And all of our shows, we built all of our shows at once. So that pig basically had a 6-week timeline. We weren't working on it just by itself, but that person was working on other things. But we basically had 6 weeks total to get it built. The bear, the 2 bears, the bear rug and the bear puppet, we spent about $900 total. Most of that was in the comforters, which were about $100 a piece, and then the aluminum structure for the claws. And again, we probably spent about 100 hours on the bear total over the course of our 6-week build. This pig was about $100. Again, most of that for the taxidermy form. And the porcupine, oh goodness, it's been a long time. I would guess we probably spent $200 on the porcupine. The fur was a little more expensive because of the length. The fur was like a 5-inch length. And then the full taxidermy form on that.
That's a super good question. Some of these are longer ago than others, but let's see, for the Falcon, the show overall was is a fairly new play, not often produced. So I had a really small budget. I believe we did that for about $60-ish, just because most of what we did use was stock, and then the turkey feathers were the expensive part because we had to buy so many. Build timelines for that was about 4 weeks, obviously among all the other projects, and that was a shop of two. For that, the our turtle friend was made in a shop of three by one person. The cost upfront for aqua resin, you have to buy it in fairly large batches, and that is a pretty expensive upfront cost, but we use it throughout several years on a variety of projects. So if that's something you can afford to have around, it's worth it, because that's going to cost you about in the $150 to $200 range to get a full kit. But the turtle itself after that is just stock foam and vinyl, so I would call that like a $40 build. Snake and squirrel, same thing. Most expensive part of the squirrel was the polyfill beads, and overall for fur materials, maybe $25, $40. Snake, cost of the leggings, and stock foam, that's, call that again like another $50-ish build. The ostrich, the feathers, and the taxidermy form were the most expensive part. I think we pulled that in at about $120-ish, and these are all like 4 to 6 week builds, with usually just one person focusing on them.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Next question is from Alex Lynn. What is the worst material to work with for fur and scales?
Well, fur, having to cut it and then dealing with all of the shedding. It's been over a year since we did the bear, and we're still finding little sheds of bear everywhere in the soft goods room. So fur for me is the worst thing.
It's almost like glitter, right? You just find it everywhere.
Absolutely.
It's exactly like glitter.
Yeah.
A lot of times when we're sewing fur, we'll like pre-shave the seam allowance just because we don't want to deal with anything else getting cut off. But yeah, you almost want to like have a separate clean room to give the animal a haircut, because it will get everywhere. I think it depends on what you use for scales. If you use like a cheap stretchy scale vinyl that's going to peel when it's worked with or stretched, that's going to degrade really quickly on stage, and I really hate that. But if you do like something that's printed or painted on a more resilient fabric, you're going to be a lot happier with your scales, in my experience.
Awesome. All right. So the next question is from Forge Dwyer. I'm hoping I'm not butchering that name, Forge. I'm sorry if I am. How do you think you would handle a fake deer that needs to be gutted on stage?
Oh, so we actually have a deer that we rent out all the time because it's needed for As You Like It. And so we actually built a full body deer like on a stick. Don't have to gut it, but um, I would kind of like what Rachel did with her falcon, probably make a hollow cavity in the body of the deer, and then the hardest part probably be the closure. Like if you have to like put a knife in and like slice it, like you don't want to hear the noise of Velcro. So you do like snaps, maybe. So like as your knife goes through, it could like pop the snaps. Um, or I'm not sure. That would be the only thing I would think would be challenging would be how you would like slice it open.
That's interesting. Borges saying maybe brown gaff tape if you did want to actually cut something each night. That's interesting. I'm not I'm not super against the whole like, when you like stretch elastic over, kind of like magician doors where you have two layers of a kind of like brown spandex over each other, and you can like get in there and pull them to the sides, especially if like a thicker dance spandex. Because that'll look closed until you put something in it and pull it to the side, which is what you have to do if you're gutting. You have to like clip it back almost. You sometimes have like clamps or things, which is kind of fun to think about. The
Yeah.
question is like, do you want actual liquid when you're doing it? And then what you're going to use for that. I've definitely offered red Jello to people, but then you have to think about sealing the whole body cavity.
Right. Yeah.
Has to be washable.
Has to be washable. Someone has to clean it out. Talk to your stage manager.
Right? All right. We touched a little bit on this when we were talking about we were talking about Wilbur. From Kim Lee, anyone ever used disappearing ink for gore/blood effects? So if you could talk a little bit more about the things that you've used besides Wilbur's effect.
Yeah, Gravity and Momentum out of Chicago makes a really good blood that's really washable. I mean, you have to work with your customer to make sure it comes out of the fabrics they're going to use because it doesn't come out of everything. And I remember at a spam conference a couple years ago, somebody talked about some show where they wanted to like write and then have the ink spill on somebody. And they actually went to Gravity and Momentum, and Gravity and Momentum actually made them a black ink that basically had the exact same formula as their red blood. It was washable. So that would be a way to go ick that's darker or black or brown or something like that. Um, so I might go that direction. We've also like done again if you could seal your animal really, really well. We've done like oatmeal and add some food coloring to oatmeal to create like nastiness coming out of a cut or a slice of an animal. Those are two that I can think of off the top of my head.
I know we recently used the Nick Dugman Pigs May Fly in its like paste form because they sell you can do methyl cellulose or a thickener to it to make it a little goopier. Um, and I actually used hibiscus tea as a blood recently. That it's like a fugitive dye because it's a plant based dye and it actually washes out pretty well from certain things. But again, you want to test it with the fibers.
Great. All right. Thank you. And from Dean, the ever-present question for us props folks. Joann's had been the go-to for so many years, especially for specialty fabrics, such as fur. Where are people going now for things like that?
When we started researching the bear, we looked into puppetry websites. And it is amazing how many places out there sell for puppets, and the variety and colors that they have. The only thing we're now having to buy all of our fabric online because we had a Joann's and it's the only thing within 100 miles of us that has fabric, 150 miles. The only thing is like we now have to like send samples to designers, like get swatches, some designers get them approved before we can buy the quantity we need. But for fur, I would say look at puppetry websites. Or I'm also going to do a quick pitch. Not the most eco-friendly thing, but there's a company in Moscow, Idaho called Moscow Hide and Fur, and they actually work with taxidermists, and they buy pelts and feathers and antlers and parts of real animals to sell to taxidermists to do the taxidermy work. And like our deer actually has a real deer pelt on it. We bought a full body deer pelt from them. It had a gunshot wound in the belly, which because the way ours was being carried on stage, you couldn't see the big hole in the pelt there. And so we actually used a real pelt for that. That'd be another way to go if you can afford it and you want that, depending on if you like how close your space is. If you want real, like, if you're in a black box or something and you need like that realistic look, they have all kinds of skins and things that you could use.
I'm going to echo everything Ben said and then say, yeah, if you just need like a plain fabric that is not for textured, the best like online videos I've seen for fabric, because I'm very tactile when it comes to shopping, right, is like Fabric Wholesale Direct, places like that. They will actually post videos of gloved hands handling the fabric and showing like the sheen of it and the twist of it. And we found actually like replicating those videos with samples for our designers, sometimes we can like avoid the shipping of the swatches, which is really nice. But in general, yeah, it is a huge loss that we are all mourning not to have a local fabric store to go to. But see if you can find your little local ones, because we found in Baltimore we found a few like craft places that now that Joann's is closing are trying to source more stuff like that. So that's like the silver lining for us.
So interestingly enough, too, there are starting to be more and more thrift fabric shops. So shops that, take in sewing things or making or craft things that folks didn't need anymore. So in Ithaca, we have So Green. And they just have tons of things that people just have been just getting rid of. So that's a really good thing to look up too. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I think we are getting really close on time. Um, let's see. Let's see. We have pretty much a statement from Sasha, but I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about this. But what they're essentially saying is that they have to keep reminding themselves how far away the audience is and not to get lost in the details. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and maybe some advice to a newer prop maker?
Sure. For a long time, we only had two spaces, and they were both about 25 feet from the audience. And so we did a thing where if you stood 20 feet away in the shop and kind of ran your fingers across your eyes like this, if it looked okay, you were good to go. We now have a studio theater where the audience walks across the stage to get to their seats. And so that level of detail has gone up for us. But yeah, I hire a bunch of people every year, and most of them are young artisans, and it's a constant struggle to walk by and be like, it's fine. It's fine. You're too close to it. We tell designers we don't take work light notes. You can't walk up on stage and stand 2 feet away from it and be like, this needs to be this and this needs to be this, and I can see this and I can see that. It's like, wait till it's under stage light and you're sitting in the audience and then give us the note. Because you can get lost in minutia of any project and it can take way too long. So think about your space, think about the distance, and focus on the prop, put more detail into the props that are crucial to the storytelling so that they stand out on stage because they have more details. You're going to focus on them more and they're going to mean more to the story. If it's a peripheral prop, if it's set dressing or whatever, like the fastest you can get it done to the quality that you need it to and get onto it, then you can focus on those props that really help tell the story. That'd be my advice.
Great advice. They call them
Yeah,
hero props for a reason, right?
yeah, I would agree with Ben. And sometimes it's good just to not only step away and do that distancing with yourself, but also grab someone from a totally different department if you have them in the theater and set them at that distance and be like, how's it look? Just to get like an audience member perspective too. Because sometimes I think as artists, we can get really in our head too about how we want our work to look to other people. And if we can remember that to other people, it looks amazing. That can help you take a step back.
Yeah.
All right. I think this is our last question. So again, for our new prop makers, what is the best way to gain skills? And this is from Isabel. Sorry, I didn't say that. College, YouTube, self-taught, and what skills do you recommend in addition to sewing?
All of them, um, uh, and every way you can. I get this question all the time at my seminars that I do for our patrons. Go to your makerspace, learn how to use the 3D printer, learn how to use the CNC, learn how to use the laser cutter. Take sewing classes if you can find somebody who will teach you sewing. Watch YouTube videos. Um, uh, like find things that you like doing and watch people doing them. I mean, YouTube is amazing. I've learned so many skills in the last 10 years. Like, I don't know how to do that, but let's watch a YouTube video and see if we can figure it out. So watch other people work in shops with other artisans, volunteer at your local theater, volunteer at your high school to help them build props for their shows. Just anything you can do just to do more of things. I mean, woodworking is great, sewing, painting, faux painting, so you can learn how to do wood graining and marble and those kind of things. Those are useful. Any kind of the technology stuff, any skill you can add to your toolbox makes you more valuable to a prop shop in the future. I know it's a lot, but just constantly make stuff. And if you make stuff for yourself, that can go in your portfolio. It doesn't just have to be stuff you do for a theater. Any project that you do, if you do your own paintings, if you do your own needlework, anything like that, that's portfolio worthy. Put it all in there.
agree with Ben. Everything is props and props is everything. So if you're out doing it for fun, it's probably also for props. And I think sculpture, molding, and casting are things in there too. I would include like hairstyling, thinking about what you're doing with the bear and stuff like that. So literally, if you know how to do something, think about how it could be used on stage and put it in the old resume.
Yep. Including baking. That one's a big one I come across a lot.
Science,
Yeah.
chemistry, anything
Oh
like
my
that.
God.
Knowing how things
Math,
interact.
math. There's a whole
Absolutely.
chapter in my
Math.
book about math.
Yes.
We promise we're
uh,
not like high school recruiters, but
right. Fluid dynamics, also another one.
Yep.
Probably in the math chapter, right? Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I think we are right at time, so I'm going to read the outro. And so here we go. All right. Thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight. I hope you had as much fun as we did and maybe picked up a few new tips and tricks along the way. We are already cooking up our late summer and fall lineup of Spaminars, so keep an eye out for announcements. And definitely keep those topic suggestions coming. We want to hear what you want to learn about. And if you are a working prop manager in nonprofit theater, opera, children's theater, or an educator teaching props, we'd love to have you join SPAM. So just head over to our website, click the link in the chat to sign up. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Those links are also in the chat. And also a big shout out to Spam and our amazing members who take these sessions or make these sessions happen. Patrick Droon, Freed, Ben Hohman, Nikki Kulas, Jen McClure. Oh, Jen McClure. There we go. Oh my God. Amy Peter and Sarah Pugh and Karen Robbie. Thanks again for joining us and prop on. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you all. Bye.